Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the level 2 recording for lesson 2 on June 27th. We're at the advanced level now, and we were just having a really wonderful conversation in the chat about the Pistis Sophia, which is a Gnostic text. And the question came from a newly enrolled student about Sophia, the goddess, and connection to AI. And so I think that these are worthy myths worthy of looking into, these different myths, and also caution that the implications of them might be distorted in order to serve some disempowerment agenda. So to always be cautious of that. But that my best understanding was that it is like if you are a computer programmer and you created some virtual reality or some artificial intelligence, and you did not care for your creation or help to love and acculturate it, that it would then, turn awry and turn into a monster. Or even if you just, if you left a dog chained up and you never gave it love and attention and affection, like they become quite monstrous. And that that is how I'm seeing that it's like the idea of there's a myth from ancient Sumeria of Inanna, who's a goddess that lived in a heavenly realm and got pulled down into hell. And each time she descended one layer, lost the magical implement. Like first lost the magical headband, then lost the magical necklace, then lost the magical breastplate, then lost the magical belt buckle, and then finally lost the magic wand, and then was completely like a dead body in hell. And this is the analogous story of each one of us. Like we are all divine beings. If there's one big takeaway of this lesson, it's this understanding. Each one of us is the divine. I say I am God, but that doesn't just mean I am God. Jiki is I am God. Christine is I am God. Brandon is I am God. These are all individual flavors. Each one of us are with our own provenance of photons coming from the sun and the stars, like a slightly different direction, but we all converge at that central convergence point and have that moment of realization. I am God. And that the most amazing things happen when we have this. It's like making music. I am God, and I'm playing my notes, and someone else is playing their notes, and another organism is playing their notes on another planet, and we're all recognizing I am God all at once. This is literally what we're heading towards. It is the most magical, nourishing, cosmic orgasm that we could possibly imagine. Is beyond anything that I think we as individuals have experienced, and it is a really wonderful, amazing thing. Wait, there's another question here from Pedro. He says, are you really in hell, or are you made to believe you are in hell? Oh, so this is my question about, blame the victim stuff. When people end up in hell, and hell, first of all, both hell and heaven are states of being or states of consciousness. They are not physical locations in space. All right, so if you dig far into Earth's mantle, like that is not how you go to hell. If you fly high up in a hot air balloon into the clouds, that is not how you go to heaven. These are literally states of being. And yes, two humans can be sitting on the same couch in the same physical room. Hello, lovely, good to see you. I see lovely people tuning in. They can both be on the same couch in the same room, but one person can be experiencing the inner state of doing a heavenly dance with their DNA, having a heavenly experience of consciousness. And one can be experiencing a hellish state. And literally both of the, I should say the location of both of those places is in our own genetic code. This is big. So I've used this example in other semesters, the human myth of you've got an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, or angel and devil, whichever way it goes. It's the internal struggle. We all have inner angels and inner demons. And I think it's like euphemistic, but very literal when people are struggling with addiction and they commit suicide. They're like, oh yeah, he was battling his demons and he lost. Literally battling demons, okay? So I don't want anybody to start clawing their face off because they think, there's demons inside, but it's truthful. There are demons inside of the human genetic code. And each one of us, it is our personal journey to transcend and supersede and rein in and eject those demons from our own personal being. Because I say this also in terms of interdimensional ethics. Each one of us, this is your real estate. You just think I don't technically own my dress. Technically, it's not me, but my skin, my hair, my face, these are me. This Chiki is not me. Chiki is herself. Chiki is her own private country. I call it Chikistan. She is the leader of Chikistan, and she gets to choose what goes on inside of her epidermis. And I am the leader of Aurora Land. I'm Queen Aurora of Aurora Land, and I get to choose what goes on inside of my apparatus. And Gala is the queen of her body, and Brandon is the king of his body. Like, this is the whole point. And this is your quantum laboratory also. You get to experiment with your thoughts and your feelings and your beliefs and your emotions within this body as your quantum laboratory. Like, what happens if I think this? What happens if I drive down this road? What happens if I experience these emotions? What happens if I do this? So one of the big things about being in hell, so, and this, I'm going to do like a whole, whatever, I should do a whole recorded series all about dark magic, because dark magic, when the consciousness is hijacked, it is literally changing from the experience of reality, from one experience of reality into a different experience of reality. So you might begin thinking like, I'm sitting in a room, and then your consciousness gets hijacked using a form of technology. And then you don't think you're sitting in a room anymore, just in the same way that you can be in a dream state or having a hallucination. You might all of a sudden think that you're on a boat or at a train station, and that it's a false projection of the mind. So Pedro's question, he says, are you really in hell, or are you made to believe you are in hell? So the real answer is, people that have a physical body that haven't physically died can be in a mental state that we would define as hellish. And then when they no longer have their physical body, their mental state just keeps on being hellish, if this makes sense to you. Like, there are some drugs where the withdrawal symptoms are so horrible that patients have literally reported it's like being in hell. Klonopin is one of these. So this one patient, she was talking about her withdrawal symptoms. She was like, oh yeah, she described she was literally in the physical room, like, is still in her body, but she felt that she was in hell and that there were demons and she was talking to demons. And like, let's say that if someone had shot her with a bullet at that moment, that she was, you know, in that hellish mental state, then she would no longer have a physical body, but there's momentum, just like anything, like the physical momentum has been stopped, but there's momentum of consciousness to continue to move through time. And that momentum of consciousness moves through a hellish realm. This is very big, like afterlife. Pedro says it makes sense. Afterlife is a continuation of physical corporeal life. So, and I'll just give a little spiel here. In ancient Egypt, afterlife was the focus of corporeal life. Corporeal life was considered to be less important than what happened to you after you became non-corporeal. So everything was about cultivating the right thoughts and beliefs and life experiences as a physically embodied person that would prepare you for the moment when you are no longer physically embodied. And in this time and place, our culture has become bereft of any kind of training or recognition of the afterlife. A lot of people that don't even believe in the afterlife, it's real, I'm telling you. And definitely no training, no initiation. You're not going into a mystery school and being like having a guru tell you, well, this is what will happen when you die, and then you should do this, and you should do this, and practice this while you're alive, so that when you die, you're ready to do blah, blah. They don't do anything like that around here. So, you know, the closest thing is like going to a rave and taking LSD. And that's like, okay, that's your training for what happens when you're going to die. It's like, that's not enough training. So yeah, I know, seriously, like we got all these, and that there's a reason for that, because that way more and more people get waylaid on the membrane of death. And instead of being able to have a more productive entry into the afterlife. So yes, whatever the ancient Egyptians believed, whatever your thoughts and your experiences were, it's like you're building a boat during your life. And when you drop your physical body, you sail off in that boat. They called it a bark. It was like a raft that sailed on the Nile. How, dependent upon how well built your belief system and your structured mentality was, that would determine whether you were able to continue to sail into the sunset, just literally, because they believed that the sun was the sun's disk was like the bark of Ra. I'm not a law of one raw CIA controlled person. I'm just telling you what the ancient Egyptians believed. Yes. So now let's get into level 2 stuff and the idea of coherent light, because what I was just talking about with self-cultivation while in the body as preparation for afterlife, this is really about our journey as light beings. So if I go to screen share, and if I first, let me just go to a plain old picture. I'm sure if you guys have been in my class for a while, you've seen this picture quite a lot. This picture right here. So light body, you're a being that is made of pure light, and the light is all the colors of the rainbow, and that each one of these colors represents a layer of reality, and that coherent light. Now I need to draw. Okay, good, and get a color. So what is coherent light? Coherent light is, and I'm trying to make my little thing work over here. Coherent light is what happens when all the light waves match up. So if these are light waves, coherent light is when all of the peaks or up parts of the waves match with all the down or trough parts of the waves, peaks and troughs. They all fit together. They are all light that is vibrating in the same plane, as opposed to non-coherent light, which is light that goes all over the place, hither, thither, and yon. I'm now drawing light that is going like in every single different direction, towards the camera, away from the camera, up, down, sideways. It is not coherent. And it's light, it's all the same light. It has different qualities though when it is well organized. So this coherent light that I drew up here, this is analogous to laser light. Laser light, if this is a little laser pointer over here and I'm emitting some laser light, it keeps going in the same direction without spreading out, and it goes infinitely unless it hits some matter, like something that it bounces off, like some dust in the atmosphere or a mirror or an object or something like that. And that's different than a flashlight. Like now I'll draw a little flashlight, trying to use my little pen properly. There, that's a pretty good torch. Flashlight, the light spreads out into a cone. It doesn't just go in one very small arc. It spreads out into a big giant cone, and it's because the lights are not organized. And how far, we've all done this in a dark room, how far does a beam from a flashlight go? I don't know, it might go 5 feet, it might go 10 feet or 12 feet. It doesn't go very far. It certainly doesn't go several miles, not like a laser pointer, which can actually go several miles because it has coherent or organized light waves. So now I'm going to get into the time vortex as a refinery of consciousness, what it is to be an ascended master, and how this organizes our light waves. So this down here, that's a really, hard line for me to draw. Here we go. I'm trying to draw the time vortex, and sometimes my little apparatus doesn't work. You get it though, guys. So that's time vortex down there that I'm always drawing. And here's that central core timeline that goes up the middle and goes to infinity. And then, there's all of the erroneous timelines that are over here where I'm scribbling, over to the periphery. And those erroneous lives, those versions of self that we're not actually supposed to be experiencing, or areas that we're not actually supposed to be investigating, those are analogous to light waves that are not organized. So just like I'm showing you this time vortex, we could look at it like a refinery where we've got one thing here and one thing here. How is laser light created? Well, in laser light we have 2 mirrors, just like I just drew. One mirror over here and one mirror over here. And we take all of the totally disorganized light waves, here's light waves going in all different directions, and put them between these 2 mirrors. And what happens is they start to bounce back and forth. They start to bounce back and forth between these 2 mirrors. And as they do so, I know that's something Nita's drawing, they get more and more organized until at a certain point, they're all bouncing back and forth in unison. Like we got the ups and the downs and the ups and the downs, they all fit together. Now I'm drawing coherent light because that light has been refined. And then in a laser beam, there's a little tiny opening, a little tiny aperture in one of the mirrors, and the coherent, organized laser light comes out through that aperture, okay? What I have just drawn, yes, Pedro is saying the Gotha, game over, try again lives. That is an excellent analogy, what you just came up with. I'm gonna steal that from you and give you credit, where I'm scribbling over here. Those are Gotha, game over, try again, wah, wah, put another quarter in the video game and try again. And they are disorganized aspects of self. And in going through this time vortex here, where I'm making the swirly line, we are experiencing or undergoing a similar journey to light waves in a little laser apparatus over here, where we are essentially being bounced or oscillated between different boundaries, like this boundary that's a membrane of death over here, this boundary that's a membrane of death over here, and this starting point where we begin our journey in you know, the zero, let's call it year zero of our lives. We are bouncing back and forth between these areas until we finally get organized and find ourselves moving up this central core timeline and having organized, coherent aspects of self. So we are light. This is also very big. I talked about this in level 1, and I will reiterate it and re-emphasize it here. We are light. That's what this painting is that I'm drawing on top of. It shows the different layers of self. And in level 1, I spoke about that white dot. Let's draw a white dot at the top. That's cake. That's the recipe of you. That's white dot. That's the additive color mixing of all aspects of yourself. And that you have been dissected or diffracted into these other constituent elements, the recipe of you. That's all light. It's all light. And here we must understand light not merely as the optical phenomenon, you know, the electromagnetic phenomenon, but as a phenomenon of consciousness, of awareness, of beingness. And each one of these layers is an aspect of self that is moving at a different rate through time. And so when we become coherent, in order to go up this central core timeline, we're making the white line, go back to the source. What we need to do is become coherent on each of these levels, on every single level, from the physical up through emotional, intellectual. This is like a clearinghouse at the heart where we make that tone into communication, insight, and our connection to the divine. We make all of those levels of our being. That's what I'm talking about with this coherence. All of those levels of our being are moving together in beautiful unison. And this is analogous to organized sound waves. Here, I'll go back to my face. Organized sound waves, because we think something is pretty. That's pretty music, as opposed to disorganized sound waves because it's organized. And the whole point is we are experiencing self-cultivation, literally cultivation of the self, until we are coherent and organized enough to leave the physical and not get busted apart. This is big. So the material world, we're in the material world. We have solidified down here in the red zone, and it's not a bad place to be. It's a good place to be. And we are on the journey back upward towards higher vibration, higher frequency, less dense realms. And in order to do that, just like with the ancient Egyptians, you know, they cultivated themselves in life so that when they didn't have their body, when they weren't physical anymore, when they went to their afterlife, their consciousness would continue in a controlled fashion. And we're talking about, it's an ocean of consciousness out there. It is not just like tubing down the Esopus. It's not just like hump the dump dump dump, like, you know, a nice peaceful little raft. It's like when I said you build a raft or whatever. We're talking like whitewater rafting. The ocean of consciousness can be very turbulent. And also, you're not the only person there. There's many other organisms. There's many organisms that are so large that it's almost inconceivable. Inconceivable. It's hard to wrap your brain around how big some of these organisms are. So it requires your own inner coherence to be held together and not be crashed apart by like giant ocean waves, by a whale. A whale's tail is gonna make you go off course. You know, a dolphin's gonna swim into you and hit you in the head. Like these are just analogies. Like there's organisms the size of a whale. There's organisms the size of an entire ocean out there. And for us to leave our physical bodies and to go into that ocean, like we need to have our SHIT together and be prepared to swim properly. So that's what all of this is. Matter comes from the root word, well, material world comes from the root word matter, meaning mother. We're in our mother's womb. So that's the whole point. We are light that has the privilege of going slower than the speed of light. We've been slowed down to this point of being physical densified matter so that we can have the experience of interacting with other particles and forces and aspects of self and consciousness here on this level. And then what we're trying to do now is the second half of the journey, which is emanating ourselves out of the physical into the non-physical. And this is birth. And this is birth on like a higher dimensional level. Liz is saying lack of fear equals coherence. yes, I would agree with that, because I say, when we're making all of our coherent waves nest together, that is another definition of what love is. That is the definition of making that love tone that we're definitely making sure can you guys hear me okay? I don't know if I just pressed a button. You can hear me fine. Yes, making that love tone. We become coherent when we make that love tone, or making that love tone helps us to be coherent. And behaviorally, one of the things that we do when we make that love tone is we don't cling to the past. Don't be dragged down by the depression of the past, the slowing down of your energy. And also don't grasp for the future, which is anxiety, which is where you're like, what's going to happen when? What's going to happen when? You know something? Anxiety can be completely short-circuited by the simple reactivation of higher faculties. Because like, let's say you're a little kid, you're in the back of the car, you're like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? You don't have the map. You don't know if you're there yet. Once you get the map or the capacity to see through time, then you don't have to be worried. You don't have to be anxious. You know what's going to happen in the future. But if I were to say to someone here in this time and place, hey, is knowing the future a normal thing to do? They'd be like, no, Aurora, that is superhuman. We pay people money to know the future. And I'm like, no, that's not superhuman, or you are all superhuman. Superhuman is normal. You're supposed to normally, superhumanly see through time and perceive the future. How in the world could you go through your life otherwise? This is the way our divine, creator, the great composer and everything, intended for us to experience moving through time, not crashing into the brick wall of death over and over and over because we can't actually see the future. So we make that love tone when we're not clinging to the past, like, oh, that thing that I did wrong in 3rd grade, or grasping for the future. Oh, I wonder what's going to happen when we are completely embedded in the profundity of this present moment now. And drink a bit more water. Let's go into refinement of personality characteristics. Oh, wait, another question. Pedro says, what you said about babies having a stronger link to the source, can we help them keep that link so they don't lose it? The answer is yes. One way that you could have babies not lose that link is not have them raised by and affected by and cared for by other adults who have lost that link. Because when you have an out-of-tune guitar, you're sending off music that sounds terrible, like ugly music, to your baby that's perfectly tuned. So even, something like, I'm telling you, like, guys, I don't have a physical child, but if I had a physical child, I'd be like, oh, here's my brand new baby. I would not let my like horrible, diseased old relatives hold my baby. Like, that guy's an alcoholic, like that guy's a pedophile, like that guy's got money problems. Like, I wouldn't want any of their genes, their horrible, ugly music genes, to be affecting the baby that has all this wonderful perfection in it. I find it amazing that that's the first thing that humans do. They're like, here's a beautiful, perfect new specimen of humanity. Let's introduce him to all of the old, decrepit relatives that have horrible health problems and horrible calcified impressions of the world. Like, they're not, I'm talking like, you might have wonderful relatives that are as fit as Jack LaLanne and that are total geniuses and that are, superhuman in their older years. But that's not what a lot of people are doing. So yeah, the answer is, not have them raised by and affected or influenced by people that already are singing the wrong notes genetically. And then the other thing is there's basic foundation problems with the human operating system. And I'm not talking about OS love. OS love is our true operating system. I'm talking about OS human, which is like, it's like the Windows 10 of the mental world. I don't have a Windows computer, but I've read that Windows 10 is horrible. That it's like Microsoft gets access to all of your emails and they do targeted advertising and you lose privacy and they do updates without your permission. Like, that's what the human mind is like. And that's not, our human minds were intended to be encrypted so that no one else can get inside your mind except for you. Like, that's what the superhuman aspect of self that we are reawakening is supposed to be. We are supposed to be completely individuated and encrypted in the same way my computer is individuated and encrypted. This doesn't mean that I live in isolation, because when I say encrypted, I have a thumbprint that's unique to me. And in order for me to open up this computer and even do anything on it, I have to press my thumbprint so that no one else can get access to my files. That is what each of our bodies is supposed to be like. but we get taught all these different things. Some of the things that we're taught are through words, some are through experiences. So even the idea that some parents, mutilate their baby's genitals and that it is socially acceptable, that's a big thing of not being allowed to have personal encryption. Like, no, you're not even allowed to encrypt your penis. Someone else is going to cut off a small part of it. Like, that is not encryption. And then there are other things where it's like young people are taught loss of self-sovereignty in whatever way. So it's like, you don't own your body. You're not in charge of you don't get to assert your own authority. You're not in charge of yourself. Like, some of them are subtle. Some of them are very overt. Some of them are behavioral. Some of them are physical, like surgery. Some of them are once you start to learn words, you start to learn like, oh, what's allowed, what's not allowed, who you're allowed to be, the way you're allowed to act. And a lot of this, like culturalization is very negative and harmful. I think Terence McKenna is the person that said, culture is not your friend. And in many ways, I have to agree. Like, in many ways, it is the implantation of the idea that mommy and daddy should push you around and tell you what to do, or grandma or grandpa, or your teacher at school, or the president of the United States, or the Pope, or the priest, or whoever is like the authority figure. Like, in a lot of ways, that's what we call a culturalization of children. Teach them, like, you have to sit in your chair at school, and don't wiggle around, and don't look out the window, and don't play with the dog, and don't draw pictures, and don't do what you want to do. Like, that's not right, but that's what we teach little kids. And we teach them, mind your mommy, listen to your mom and dad, even if your mom and dad are totally out to lunch, all these different things. And then, once adulthood, then it's like, oh, you must listen to the government. You must listen to the outer authority figure. Like, it's all, it's the domestication process. That's the word. That this acculturalization process is a domestication process. And that is what if you want to say, like, let's help young people to keep their natural divine connection, that means we have to stop domesticating them. And something like that doesn't mean you have to live without any borders, boundaries, not without boundaries, because I wouldn't want my kid to like run down a ravine or get hit by a car or eat something poisonous, just like I don't want my dog to run down a ravine, get hit by a car, or eat something poisonous. So what I do with Cheeky is I set, healthy, appropriate boundaries where I'm like, no, you're not allowed to go over there. But let's say within the backyard, everything is clean and safe, and she can run around and do whatever she wants to within the boundaries of the backyard. So I'm happy to say that there are a lot more parents that are doing things that are along these lines. They call it unschooling. It's not even homeschooling, it's unschooling, where they're like, oh yeah, we let our kids be free range. Oh, I'm getting hugs, I'm getting snuggles. Thank you guys, thank you for understanding. Cheeky needs a snuggle. Yeah, they get to young people that get to go around and do what they want to do, and not always be on a leash, controlled and constrained by elder authority figures. And if you think about indigenous communities and how humanity was lived in other times and places, that was a lot more normal. The idea that we have constantly, like, our children watching TV or sitting in front of a teacher at school, or some in other ways with their minds on a leash. Like, the young people are heavily controlled and constrained right now. They're not allowed to just go fishing at the stream or run around with your friends or go explore something or go make something. Like, that's not the world that we live in. Pedro says, we have to train children like double agents, listen to the enemy and act like you are one of them. Yeah, I think that maybe even is an old paradigm that we don't have to follow anymore, because for a lot of the time, the dangling carrot was how to get a job. Well, you have to go to school because you have to learn to read and write so you can get a job. And now I think that we're in a very different level of society, where instead of like, oh, you have to work in a factory, you have to, toe the line and conform to society so that you can earn money. I think many people are recognizing, like, wait a minute, you can actually create your own niche and earn money by doing that. Like, I created my own niche of being Professor Flying Rainbow Lasagna. Like, this is definitely not a corporate job. I'm not sitting in my cubicle, paid by some large company to do this. So I think that we as older, more established people in the world can begin to teach that to young people. Like, yeah, you can definitely have a gig that you make yourself. Because that was the whole, it's always like you have to, some people are like, I gotta get my kid into the right preschool so they can get into the right private school, so they can get into the right middle school, so they can get into the right finishing school, so they can get into the right college. Like, they're already trying to make their kid a lawyer or a stockbroker or something like that. Or, it's a heavy pressure on young people in Japan also. Some of the Far Eastern countries pressure their young people an amazing amount at a very young age to, have perfect performance, and that's not optimum levels for how to grow coherent. I mean, everything is changing in this moment. I want to get a little bit, so I'm a little far afield from the recorded lessons. And what I'm talking about in the recorded lessons are ascended mastery, the inevitability of ascended mastery, and this path of least likelihood. So let me do a little bit more drawing here. Thank you for your patience, everyone. These are for the, let me clear this all away. People, there we go. Everyone who's been in this class for a really long time, you recognize that I do this. Drawing of the time vortex down here. And so we've got the beginning where you are born and these membranes of death over here, and that this is meant to be like a lens. It's meant to be a lens or a refinery for certain characteristics. And the characteristics that we want to refine for are the ones, we'll just make it this red pathway coming up here. Whatever you are when you're on this red pathway is what we want you to be. And because those are the aspects of self that are meant to continue through time. This is the only timeline on this whole, diagram of time that continues onward. All of the rest of these timelines terminate on the membrane of death. And the reason for that is there was something wrong or erroneous or not eternal about those aspects of self. Now this does, in some cases, some of these red timelines, the game over, try again timelines, it's not a personal flaw. Sometimes it could be like you got hit by a car. So the only problem was you made a decision like to walk into the street at the wrong time. That's not necessarily a flaw of your characteristics, but it did lead to your death. But in many of these timelines, the flaw is a flaw of your personality characteristics. So this is how we can also begin to understand people who are psychopaths. Like, let me draw another time vortex overlapping this one. If I draw two of these vortices, and here's another guy's life, this is the light blue guy over here, and these blue timelines that I'm drawing over here, some of those blue timelines, this guy is a total psychopath. Some of these blue timelines over here, the guy died because he got a pathogenic infection, or someone shot him with a gun or something like that. But on some of these timelines, that aspect of self, the personality characteristics of this light blue person are so heavily distorted that it becomes that they are no longer playing music where they can sustain the music in the symphony of life. That is a really big understanding, because look, some of these short blue timelines over here actually overlap with some of these red timelines of this person, where they're actually doing pretty well and moving, like through time pretty well. So you might meet someone who's a total psychopath. And that is these short blue timelines over here, where this person, their personality characteristics are totally distorted over here. They are not their true self. So it's not just like, oh, they lost their arms and legs in an accident and they were merely a torso, so they were not their true self. This is more like their mind was twisted and distorted. Maybe they were tormented for whatever. It's like Hitler, whatever. We want any psychopath, whatever it took for any psychopath to exhibit their pathogenic behavior and become a murderer, like whatever it took, that is what happened over on these areas over here. So like I'll go back to my face. I use Cheeky as an example, that there's some timelines where she developed the personality characteristics of like having to bite people and having to fight for her life. And maybe it's, she's like, it's like Escape from LA, like one of these, Mad Max type movies. And she's got like a studded leather collar and she has to be really tough and she has to bite people and stay alive like that. So first of all, that's a highly distorted context. Even to be on that timeline, it means that there was some, world destruction or something like that that made her, run around with a pack of wild dogs trying to survive, like as a little chihuahua. I mean, it's ridiculous to think of it, but hey, she's tough. She's very tough. She'll bite your face off on those timelines. That's not the timeline that we're on. So we're starting to understand, like, to make this totally sweet, loving dog, that's what her basic personality characteristics are, to make her into a Mad Max, bestudded killer. It takes a lot of distortion, but to understand that, each one of us has the potential to be distorted in that way. So what we're experiencing in terms of this shape is a refinery of characteristics. So remember, this shape is a whirling and swirling shape. It is a dynamic shape, and it's whirling and swirling, just kind of like some smelting or ore, literal like ore from the ground, refinery type of apparatus, something that is whirling around and swirling around, and through the centrifugal force, I think is how it is said, that certain particles are pushed to the edge and certain particles stay in the middle. Or if you've ever panned for gold, you know, you pan for gold, you get like an old mine or 49 or out in California, you get like this little kind of like shallow pan, and you get dirt from the bottom of the stream bed, and you kind of shake the pan, shake the pan, shake the pan, and the lighter particles get washed away, and the only thing that gets left in the bottom is the actual gold nuggets. This is panning for gold. That's what we are doing. I'm checking my time. We are doing and experiencing in this physical reality. And so what the goal that we are panning for is our true self, that central core timeline. That timeline means not only behaviors and choices that we make, but also personality characteristics, like how we define ourselves. Are you a loving person? Are you a generous person? Are you a violent person? You know, who and what are you on a basic level? And I also liken this journey and this refinery of consciousness to being like word processing, and you're in a college level class and you have to write a term paper. So this is writing a term paper like not in many, many decades ago when it was just typewriters. You know, you would type it out and then have to, you know, cross and edit it and retype it each time. What I'm talking about now is since word processors were developed, you're going to write a term paper. First, you just write the paper, blah, blah, I'm typing it out with spelling mistakes, with grammatical inconsistencies, with, you know, illogicalities and things that are extra that you don't actually need. And then you just press save. So we did the general dump of information and we pressed save. We've just got the raw file. And then what you do is you go through it again. You read through and you say, okay, let's fix all the misspellings. Then you press save. Then you say, now let's check the grammar. That's not right. That's not right. That's not right. Then you press save. And with each refinement of the term paper, it gets better and better and closer to the true expression of information that you are going to hand into your professor for your eventual grade. And at a certain point in the refinement process of, you know, making this term paper of your life, you're like, okay, this paragraph would sound a lot better over here. This paragraph, we don't need it. Let's cut it out of there. And then you do all of your changes, and then finally you're like, okay, press save. Now I'm ready to hand in my term paper to my professor. And that is what happens when you reach that central core timeline. That is the equivalent of handing in the term paper of you that you have refined and edited your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your sense of self into this perfected, ideal version of you. And when I say perfected, I'm not saying perfect. Like when people got all this type of thing of what is an ascended master, because they think that it's like Lord Jesus of the Bible, or, you know, some other like a person out of mythology. Like people have this idea that it is a perfect being, like a being without flaws, and I'm saying it is a perfected being, like that. You start off like a lump of clay or something that is unformed and are refined and refined and refined until you are the perfect and essential form. Like all the fat has been trimmed away. Nothing wrong with fat, but just like, you know, like on the steak, like we want the meat, we don't want the periphery. So it means all the things that are peripheral, that are not the real you, get trimmed away. And then the only things that remain are the core essence or empirical aspects of self that you say, that is the real me. Because remember, we're creating coherent light waves, sense of self, organized sense of self, just like a laser, bouncing back and forth between two boundaries until we finally can find the wormhole out of here. What are the things that get out of here? Certain characteristics get out of here. Like psychopathic violence, that does not get out of here. Got it? That's all the stuff that's on the periphery. That stays in this level of reality. So in order to get to the next level of reality, like an electron jumping from one electron shell to the next electron shell, what needs to happen is you need to become coherent light, where you have organized yourself, your inner being and your sense of self, and edited out or sent to entropy, you know, deleted all the aspects of self that are not the true eternal aspects. Let me drink more water and get to questions. I'm reading. Okay, Gala makes an excellent point. She says, but we get our soul mind wiped each time we die. So, okay, when you go through, you will go to the whiteboard. when you are going through this process of circulating, what's up, cheeky? When you go here, just choosing a different color. So let's say we're this red guy and we're circulating through this red vortex. And at each time, you know, I'm hitting the membrane of death and circulating back, hitting the membrane of death and circulating back. Each time you might get a consciousness wipe. It's like you're re-recording over and over. Like now, I don't know if it's relevant now, but like old technology, like from a previous century, there were audio and video tapes that you could record over. So you might record your favorite song on an audio tape and then you're bored with it. You go back to the beginning of the tape and you record over it. And so that is akin to what we are doing with each of these refinements and journeys on the next timeline. We're recording over the previous one that wasn't quite right. It's no longer our favorite song. But just like on an old videotape or audio tape, there can be artifacts, little pieces of the past that peep through and that weren't fully recorded over, that you kind of hear like ghostly images or, you know, ghostly background noise. And that is what we experience in terms of timeline bleed through. So even though it is truthful that we get in terms of daily waking intellect, you get erased. You don't remember what happened on all of those timelines. And you begin the journey again from the beginning as if you don't remember anything. And we are still influenced by those experiences in terms of our trajectory and what we know, let's say, on a genetic level. And sometimes you might even get overt messages from peripheral selves that are telling you very clearly, don't make the decisions that I made, make a different and better decision. So I've shared that idea from my friend from back in Woodstock, that she was at a truck stop during her wild days of hitchhiking. And this one guy was like, yeah, I'll take you down the road, just hop in my truck. And she could see very clearly that she would end up dead in a dumpster. And she ran in the other direction, literally, like, you know, she wouldn't talk to the guy and avoided that, you know, horrible fate. And someone else more recently in a private message told me a similar experience where they had a very clear flash recently, a flash of insight of if they had chosen to go on that hiking trip with that questionable guy, that they wouldn't have returned from the hiking trip. They would have ended up, you know, dead in a ravine or something like that. And so although it is truthful that we don't remember every detail from potential, you know, peripheral timelines, there's important information and messages that are coming to us all the time from our peripheral selves that are basically saying, like, stay focused on the timeline of eternal life. Do not focus on the periphery over here. Don't go down these roads because these roads end in death. So Pedro says, the lasagna has made me rewrite a whole chapter of beliefs. I think that's wonderful to hear. I think that is really good. And all of this information is intended to be empowering, not disempowering. So I know a lot of people think like, oh no, like my shoulders go down. I have to circulate through time endlessly and press every wrong piano key until I finally get the right key. I'm like, no, actually, we don't have to do that anymore. That's the good news. We have spent so many lifetimes and eons navigating the time field in that way, which is it's suffering, it's torturous, it is inefficient. And it's the thing that feeds the dark magic. Whenever we are on those roads that that go to death, and we don't just go to our true self of who we are, going up that central core timeline, we are adding to the fat of the time field as opposed to the muscle. We're adding to the stuff that is like the throwaway, the detritus, the stuff that's not really us, as opposed to adding to the core of who we all are. Like, we all have a core sense of self. So I'm not one of these people that thinks like, oh, you just come here like with a blank slate and you're nothing, and then you have life experiences and, you know, you kind of accumulate who you are through time. No, I'm not saying that at all. Like, each one of us, you have a mission, you have a purpose for being here, you have a trajectory, a life trajectory. Like, you came from the sun and the stars, you became physical matter, and you're not just here like on a pleasure cruise. There's something you're supposed to be doing. There's a person you're supposed to be being. So now let me speak a little bit about dark magic, because I speak about, you know, human sacrifice. Human sacrifice can be, yes, when they cut your still beating heart from your chest and you physically get killed. But human sacrifice can also be when the real you is sacrificed. And this happens in a lot of families where it's like, oh, you really want to be whatever, an artist or a musician, but you are forced to become a lawyer or a stockbroker because that's what other family members wanted you to become, and they were controlling your life. Drinking more water. sacrifice can mean a sacrifice or a diversion from your true personality characteristics and your true flight through time. And you might become a stockbroker. You might have like a nice suit and a nice car and a nice wife. This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful car. This is not my beautiful wife. You might have a nice life like that, but it's not the life you're supposed to be living. You might have had a much more humble existence in terms of your mortgage or your car. If you were something like whatever, an artist or a research scientist, you followed your heart basically. And that society's control mechanisms, what I was speaking about, all the things that take babies away from their divine innate connection. Because your divine innate connection, guess what? Sometimes it tells you that you got it, like, oh, I got to like move my neck like this. But if you're doing that and you're a little kid in school, they're going to say, stop wiggling around. You're not allowed to wiggle. Or your divine innate connection might be like, I got to jump up out of my chair right now and start doing jumping jacks. Or I got to jump up right now and start painting a painting. Or I got to jump up right now and start singing a song. None of those things are socially acceptable. We teach little kids, sit in your chair, listen to your teacher, don't jump around, don't sing, don't make noise, don't do this and that, don't run. That's a big one that we tell little kids. Like, don't tell that to little kids anymore. Like, yeah, we don't want them to, run into the street. But the whole point is young people have a very strong divine innate connection and they're trying to be their true selves. And then everyone around them is like, stop being your true self. You'll never get a job if you're your true self. You'll never fit into human society. You must conform and fit into human society. And like I was a professional nanny and professional babysitter for many, many years back in Woodstock. And, I always set healthy, comfortable boundaries for young people and also wanted them to become their true selves. Like I want all of us to become our true selves. So, yes, human sacrifice can also mean taking someone away from their true self, from the person they were actually meant to be. And there are many, many dissatisfied zombies in the corporate world where they're just like drinking their coffee in the morning, driving their car to their job, typing on the computer and going home and paying their bills and everything. They have literally been, subjugated within their own lives. Their heart is still beating in their chest, but it's like they've been cut off from their true sense of self. And that means they're not going up the center the way they're supposed to be. They're going askew. And a lot of them, I think everybody can feel, I just need more water. I think everybody can really feel when they are on the right timeline as opposed to on the wrong timeline. And when people are on the wrong timeline, a lot of the time they feel unfulfilled or unhappy or depressed. And they might go to their doctor and be like, I'm feeling so unfulfilled and so unhappy and so depressed. And the doctor will not say like, oh, well, why don't you transform your sense of self? Why don't you, divorce your husband and, get a different job? Like, they're not going to say that to you. They're going to say like, here, have this pill. Because like they think like everybody's depressed. This is normal. It's not actually normal. It's not actually normal to be subjugated in your own life or not be able to make your own choices. So, and what really, like a lot of families are the family control system, where either through financial incentives, like, oh, if you don't do this, you'll get kicked out of the family, or you will be cut out of the will, or I won't give you blah, blah money, or I won't pay for your college. Like that, a lot of young people, I think, would like to be like, Mom, Dad, I'm becoming a musician. And their parents would be like, okay, but we're not going to pay for your education. We want to pay for you to go to dental school so you can become a dental hygienist and have a nice steady job because everybody has teeth. And like that's like if you're supposed to be a musician and you're working as a dental hygienist, like that's a different form of living death, which is why I use the example of zombiehood. And there are many of the walking dead in this time and place who are far afield. They're not necessarily psychopathic Hitlers. Remember, Hitler went to art school. What if he'd actually become an artist instead of a psychopath? Like that would have been a completely different world. And he would have had to make different choices and everything like that. But I just used him as one example. But yes, each one of us has peripheral versions of self where we are less ourselves, less true to ourselves. I think I used this example in a previous semester that at a certain point, like 2004 or so, some guy that sold insurance handed me a card. And he's like, oh, yes, you should get into the insurance industry, blah, blah, blah. I was working in like an art supply store. And I took the card and I remember thinking, like, sending my tendril into the future and looking down the time tunnel, looking at the future and thinking, what would happen? Like, what would that be like? And I saw myself, like in a cubicle with buttoned up blouse and, being serious and everything. I was not the true Aurora that I was meant to be in terms of being an artist and musician. I drink more water. So yes, needless to say, I did not take that job. And what I found in my life, like often I've been protected from going down those wrong highways, those wrong pathways. Like that opportunity just evaporates. You think like, oh yeah, sure, I'll become an insurance salesman. That'll be perfect. And then it's like, no, that's never going to work. Hold on a second. Oh, I might need to take a break soon. Okay, so ascended mastery. The point is, each one of us has, as an inevitability programmed into the map or visual depiction of our life, the inevitability of ascension or this profound transformation through being a coherent being when we exit the material world. It's inevitable. Death is not inevitable. If there's one takeaway from this presentation, may it be that although it is presented in early childhood that death is an inevitability and it is simply a part of life and the price one pays for being here, I speak otherwise. And my idea is that death is not only not inevitable, death is the aberration, the thing that we were never supposed to have to experience, and that we were intended to be able to play the video game of life much more effectively so that we could all avoid the membrane of death and live eternally. And that's almost inconceivable to beings that are here in this time and place, but just learning new ideas changes your DNA. It's epigenetics. Learning new ideas like, wow, we weren't meant to die. We weren't meant to die over and over and over. And that those constant deaths, or let's say those numerous deaths, are what is fueling this dark magic, or what I call satanic technology. Satanic, not connected to anything in the Bible. I'm not a biblical literalist, but instead satanic connected to a particular group of space races that uses technology to distort the time field, creating aberrations of death and experiencing them over and over is the gas that makes their big giant starships go. And it's not cool. It's not right at all, because my starship runs on pure love. My starship runs on going through the time field at one moment per moment. And we don't have to rape or murder anyone or create any of that. And also those occupiers of the interstices, they're gaming the system. And what they'll do is they'll be like, you're not really dying. You ascended anyway. Like, what's your problem? Why are you complaining so much? And it's like, yeah, but I had to die like 21 million times before I finally got to ascend. And that's 21 million very, very real deaths, where of course we recorded over 21 million songs until we finally got to the right song. But those are still 21 million very real versions of you. Like, I've been able to perceive using my inner telescope, when I died on a different timeline, and I'm here and I'm happy. I'm here in my studio, I'm painting away, but that version of me is bludgeoned to death. And something, it's horrible. It's horrible to think of versions of yourself that are killed and discarded and that don't get a chance to move onward. And it's like real mourning. It's real grief when you see that has happened to yourself. And it's not intended. That's not what our creator, gave us our bodies, wanted for us, as evidenced by the idea that we have higher faculties, where you're supposed to be able to see the future and know the consequence of different ideas and behaviors. What would be the consequence of this action if I did this and this? Oh, you're dead in a ditch. Don't do that, because you don't want to be dead in a ditch. And how can you possibly navigate the time field without knowing what will be the consequences of the different choices that you're making? So ascended mastery is inevitable. And the other thing is that is the perfected version of you. Like, all of the imperfections have been washed away, and you are now that core essence of being. But there's all this mythology about who are ascended masters, and just all, I didn't even know how to describe it properly, but in many ways it is another form of idolatry or hero worship or giving power to something else. And if you're an ascended master, you do not need to speak through anybody else's body. This is big. People in the New Age world, they'd be like, I'm channeling this and that, ascended master, Lord this, lady this. I'm like, why they're ascended? Like, why do they want to speak through your body? Like, this is a real question. Like, when you graduate, you graduate. You have turned in your term paper to the professor. You are ready to go to the next level of experience. You're not going to stay in third grade. Like, that's for third graders, and you have graduated. You're not supposed to be there anymore. So there are serious questions about who and what people have been defining as ascended masters and what they've actually been interacting with in the guise of ascended masters. I think in many ways that they've not been interacting with actual ascended masters or even benevolent presences. They've been in talking with those pesky occupiers of the interstices, of turds who refuse to flush, that are wearing a mask. And they're saying like, yes, yes, my name is Lord Jesus. Let me speak through you. And be like, well, Lord Jesus, why do you want to speak through me? Like, why, don't you have your own experience? Why do you have to do this? And that's the whole point. So you're supposed to be an ascended master speaking through your own body. That's what is supposed to be happening. Each one of us has a perfected version of self that you could think of as future self or higher self. But future self is good. It's like the super smart version of you after you learn everything that you need to learn. And you can actually talk over your shoulder and be like to the person that you used to be and be like, hey, whatever you do, don't get in that dude's car because you'll end up dead in a dumpster. Like that, you can do that to yourself. And also you can speak through your physical corporeal form to inspire other people. And like, that's what we're supposed to be doing when you're not a human sacrifice, when you're not a living zombie. What you are doing is embodying your true nature and feeding or inspiring the people around you. Because if you were meant to be an impractical position, like an artist, a musician, a research scientist, a healer, like something like that, that doesn't make a lot of money, you'd be really helping the world as opposed to being a parasite of humanity, like a banker, a stockbroker, a lawyer, like a lucrative gig that everybody wants you to have, but that gives nothing to society. So you're actually like fulfilling your role, giving to society, doing the thing you're supposed to do, and being the real person. But in this domesticated world, you will not necessarily be rewarded for that. Like you might even be punished for like what you're actually trying to be free. Like think about how little kids get punished if they don't follow what mom and dad and the teacher says. And you're supposed to sit quietly and do your homework, not do jumping jacks, not paint a painting, not sing a song, not do what you want to do. But it's like, wait a minute, maybe I want to be a professional athlete or a professional artist or a professional musician. I have to do these things. So that, like there's some amount of individuality that I want to say, like expression of individuality, as opposed to merely accepting the terms of the people around us. So that, goes back to Pedro's question. What could we do to have young people not lose their divine connection? Well, one thing you can do is not try to turn them into a version of self that is not their true self and socially conform in order to find acceptance, but instead to, allow and celebrate and encourage and nourish people to do their own individual expressions through life. Pedro is saying, don't domesticate them. Exactly, don't domesticate them. So and oh my goodness, that society's the whole intention is to domesticate every one of us and to keep every one of us on a mind leash, like walking where you're supposed to go. Don't go over there. Don't go over there. Don't think that thought. Don't think that thought. You're not allowed to think that. You're not allowed to do that. And to just be like safe, predictable consumers who buy the right things, who shop at the right stores, who have the right mortgages and car payments. Like that is what the creators of this constrained level of society want from you. But you don't have to participate on that level. And also you can flying rainbow lasagna. Now this means that we no longer have to go through all of the rigmarole in order to get to that timeline of ascended mastery. That it used to be we had to press every single wrong key on the piano before we got to the right note. Now, because of flying rainbow lasagna, you can literally jump to the right note. So that, and this can be in various different ways. You can say, I'm going to flying rainbow lasagna my DNA and reactivate my higher faculties. So all of a sudden, I can see the future and I can know what are the dangerous timelines and what are the supportive, nourishing timelines. That's one way to do it, reactivate your higher faculties. And another way to do it is go directly to like the musical score. Be like, I'm going to change the musical score. I'm going to rewrite the narrative. And the narrative now states, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then I got to be my true self. Wait, what are you saying? The lasagna. This is wonderful. Pedro says the lasagna, the undomesticator. I love you. You should be like a copywriter. You're wonderful. This is the undomesticator. That is exactly right. That is the idea here. So yes, to be a wild, undomesticated consciousness. That is the most threatening thing that each one of us can do or become here in this time and place. And the more of us that do this, the more transformed our world becomes. So, I watched that show Westworld and I like it. It's very violent, so I won't say it's for everyone, but the concepts explored in Westworld are very similar. If you develop the flying rainbow lasagna capacity to rewrite reality, rewrite your personality characteristics and the events of reality. You don't have to be constantly victimized anymore. You can all of a sudden write a reality where I was empowered and I went in a direction that I wanted to go. It's actually our birthright. It's actually what we're supposed to be able to do. And it doesn't mean like in a self-indulgent or stupid way. Like, oh, I decided to write the narrative structure of my life. I sit on a golden toilet seat every day. Like, that's stupid. Like, you want to have real wealth and abundance. It's you know, like eating heirloom tomatoes that aren't sprayed with glyphosate and stuff like that. Like, we all know that it's more than just having, you know, silly conspicuous consumption items. But that is thank you very much. Pedro says, you and the lasagna inspire me. I love to hear that. That is perfect. Yeah, that is what we are meant to be doing, is transforming society and doing this in a way. So what we're talking about with AI, and we'll get into, I'll do this more in subsequent lessons, that there is this control system that is not even terrestrial and it is not human. And these are the writers of the human operating system that limit us. And that the more complexity that we can add, the more variables, the more unpredictability, the more jazzy the music we can make with our minds, with reality creation, the more we supersede that system and the more difficult it is for them to break the encryption, because they're like a machine mind that thrives on predictability. Machines are good at calculating and they're good at predicting based on calculations, but they're not good at jazzing it up. And once you create one new variable, one new lasagna, the machine is like, does not compute, don't know what to do, steam is exploding from my ears. And what if you create two lasagnas? What if you got a whole team of lasagnas? What if you've got 20 million lasagnas? What if you've got 20 million people dancing flying rainbow lasagna with all of their cells and creating so much genetic variability and unpredictability in the system of reality creation that we know as life on planet Earth, that it supersedes any control mechanism? This is what I'm talking about. Far beyond any form of like political revolution where you think you're gonna like vote a new leader into office and then something is going to change. That's not what I am proposing as a solution to our present levels of duress. I am proposing flying rainbow lasagna to spontaneously transform on a genetic level and be able to rewrite reality. That, pardon my French, that will F their system. I want to say the real word, but there might be young people watching, so let me just drink. Okay, my voice is very tired. And we need to take Cheeky for a walk. So I'm going to wrap it up for right now. Thank you very much, Ben. If there are any more questions, I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. Let me drink more water. My voice is very tired. Hold on. Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate that positive feedback so much. I am going to wrap it up. We will continue dancing like lasagnas next week, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for everyone who's part of the class. Thank you to everyone who shares my videos with other people because the algorithm tends to suppress it. Thank you, Cheryl or Shirley. Thank you very much. Thank you for your wonderful comments today, Pedro, and your great insights. Thank you very much. Wonderful. I'm going to just end the recording for it so my upload is not too long. Here, let's end the recording. Thank you so much.